well, he had to pay for his hard work. So let's move on now to the roundtables. And I'd like to call to this stage Frank Cinque, the Director General of E4 Impact Foundation, Arantxa Gonzalez, Executive Director of the ITC, Marcella Panucci, Director General of Confindustria, Francesco Vismara, Institutional Relations Director of the San Patrignano community. Let's start with Africa. We're starting with Africa for two reasons, because it is the focus of the project put together by these associations and foundations, but also because Africa is the continent where problems need to be solved first and foremost. 50% of the population live with less than $1 every single day. There's extreme poverty on that continent. And if we look at all the indexes across the world, we see that there really is a need for the SDGs, 2030 SDGs, so that we reach them, we accomplish them in Africa, and we're actually out in Africa by 80 million people at least. So we're not able to reach the objectives there. We need to get these people out of poverty, at least 1.6 people every second. That would be the target, and we're actually managed to extracting from poverty 0.8% every second. So we haven't yet reached our goal. So let's start with Frank Cinque, Director General of E4 Impact Foundation, because based on what happened here last year during the Sustainable Economy Forum, together with the community, this new initiative was created, which focuses on a private-private partnership and aims to help entrepreneurs in Africa and to provide them with opportunities for development, using also those resources that we have, for example, our know-how. What have the results been so far? Thank you. Well, let's look at the results then immediately. Yes, very quickly. Thanks to the collaboration between Presidents Bonacci and Moratti, we have created a private-private partnership between Italian and African businesses. This is a social inclusion project that focuses on inserting people in the marketplace, in the job market, especially in Africa, but also with businesses that here employ people from the African continent. And we also have focused on creating a system whereby we can support initiatives like this. We started by selecting, together with the ITC, 40 African businesses which were filtered because they could have been structured sufficiently well and with at least one balance sheet, able to dialogue with Italian businesses that were, of course, more structured, and able to create a partnership, starting with a mentoring program, which we extended. These 40 African businesses created or were placed on a Confindustria platform, because the role of E4 Impact and ITC was to identify those African business partners, and the role of Confindustria was to promote through their 150,000 members the possibility to create a partnership directly with Italian businesses in their sector. Perhaps after your second question, I can talk about the result of this. But I can say that we also set up a training program, creating partnerships with local institutions, for example, the Red Cross and other associations and organizations I will cite later, for business training and for the insertion of the local diaspora here in Italy. And also, during the next keynote, we will be hearing about the start of the launch of a financial tool that can in fact support Italian and African businesses who have shown a positive social and environmental impact. So what is the main objective? This was the first step that obviously will need to be extended and expanded. President Boccia said we want to move from best practices to volumes. So to start, We have had 4 roadshows here in Italy, and we also organized a proactive event to search for those businesses that are aligned with our African partners. We identified about 52 in 5 months, 52 Italian businesses who have shown that they are willing to partner up with us. We have created a partnership, a collaboration with already 18 Italian businesses and as many African businesses in various phases of development. We're working in technological transformation, but other sectors as well, distribution channels, import channels of African products which arrive here in Italy. Arantxa Gonzalez, the Executive Director of the ITC. This is a UN agency and a WTO agency. Seen as though we're talking about the WTO, and a few days ago we heard about an economic slowdown at global level, and we're talking about countries that are exporting. Obviously, the slowdown is not very good news, is it? Well, 2 things happened this week. First and foremost, the World Trade Organization and the IMF have signaled that there has been an economic slowdown, and also there's been a slowdown in trade at global level. And the origin behind this is uncertainty resulting from unilateral measures that have been taken by certain countries. Protectionism, for example, as we well know, protectionism does not protect, as it says, but instead it seems to be the easiest way out of responding to very complex problems. But something else happened this week. I'm not sure, Luca, if you published this in Il Sole 24 Ore. The 54 countries of the African Union have decided, or rather decided a year ago, that they will destroy a major African market, a major African trade area, starting at local trade level. This is a treaty that was ratified already by 22 African countries, and it went into effect this week. And it goes in a very different direction. You must understand that today for African countries it is important that we reduce fragmentation, that we create a space for African entrepreneurs, but also for Italian entrepreneurs who want to work with African businessmen, who want to find a growth area. So how does this private-private partnership actually work, and how does it help these businesses take off and export, for example? What is your role in all of this? Our role is to create a sense of trust between the 2 partners. Italy, like many other continents, and Asia, for example, but I'm not referring only to China, which is very present in Africa, but also Indonesia, Korea. They're very present in Africa. But what we're trying to do is to reduce uncertainty. We try to create this business community together. There is this terrible fact. There's this almost marketing that Africa is a terrible reality, but it's not the case. And that's why we need to start with trust, that people have faith in Africa. The next thing is to match European, in this case Italian businesses, and business opportunities in Africa. And the third thing we do, and that is our raison d'être, is to work with these businesses in Africa to make them more competitive. Not only in South Africa, for example, but also in Ethiopia, Rwanda, Liberia, Uganda, in all these African countries where there are many opportunities and where they need a competitive advantage so that they can compete against European markets, for example.
So we heard about an ad hoc technical committee being set up for supporting sustainability. Can you tell us what's going on, Francesco Vismara? Marcella Panucci. Yes, thank you very much to Frank and Arantxa. We've been working together very closely with San Patrignano as well this year. To involve that many companies took a great effort. It sounds like a small number, but in actual fact it's a very large number. It took 5 months Some of the participants here, you'll be hearing them speak at the next few panels, and I'd like to thank them for what they've been doing. No, just a comment about Africa. Arantxa's right. Africa has enormous opportunities. It's growing, it's thriving, the population's growing, urbanization is growing. In sub-Saharan Africa, there are major reforms ongoing on the business side. So this is really a great time. But it needs to be viewed differently with respect to other people going to Africa and Asia with a predatory view. What we're seeing is the need to create partnerships with African businesses in order to create stable growth and sustainable growth for that continent. It's a continent that is on our doorstep, Italy's and Europe's, and we attract many people from the continent that we must be able to manage effectively, and this is an important inclusion-oriented project, but we need to offer opportunities as well to them in their own countries. So President Boccia decided to set up this technical committee on sustainability when he came to chair Confindustria, and he did that in the framework of industrial policy to send out a real strong signal as to why sustainability must be reconciled with growth for Italian industry. So now we're talking about inclusive growth, sustainable growth. For an industry that must take on board these objectives, and the first step was a manifesto that was created on sustainability based on Agenda 2030 of the United Nations, and that really set out a checklist for Italian businesses. The state of the art in our industries is very satisfactory, I must say, insofar as sustainability is really becoming embedded in the way Italians do business, particularly Italian industry. And I'm looking at the social side, I'm looking at the environment side, I'm thinking about employee training, all those various external activities also relating to local communities that are coming to the fore. So that was where we started, and we eventually set up a number of different activities like roadshows for companies, various other initiatives involving, for example, the creation of temporary managers who begin working for smaller companies that do not have the wherewithal to afford certain projects, and then we're starting with 20 companies where these temporary managers join the company and shape it across the board with a view to supporting sustainability. And it's a major effort. It's a whole cultural shift, but really it's giving us a great deal of satisfaction. And we're working on a very highly aware fabric, if you will. So we've been looking at thousands of companies that come together and interact on various subjects and issues. Is the change actually happening, or is there a lot of greenwashing? Yes, we're all sustainable. All I have to do is call myself, an environmentally friendly person or eco-supporting person, and I stick a label on my company, and that's it. Or in fact, is more happening? Are companies actually changing their behavior? Yes, there's a lot more actually going on in the way companies behave. Already stating that a company is pro-sustainability changes the way they do business. And then obviously it has to become part and parcel of the way the company operates, walking the walk, not just talking the talk. So there's a lot of investment going on in sustainability as well. Companies invest for reputational reasons, for marketing reasons, but they also invest because a sustainable business is sounder, more resilient when it's sustainable, in fact, because you can factor in environmental risks, social risks, etc., etc. And the whole new non-financial communications relating to sustainability that the EU has called upon, has required, means that a company has to do more to support sustainability and is rewarded if what they say they will do is actually done. Francesco Bismara, Director of Institutional Relations here at the Fondazione San Patrignano. Well, first of all, one might be inclined to say you've got enough problems as it is. Why look for projects to support in Africa. But of course, the development model, the business model that you've put together here, really tallies with the concept of supporting Africa by using employment as a form of social inclusion and social growth and development. So it seems to me that you're exporting a little bit of your own experience here. Yes, that is actually true. That's right. And that is why I have to explain what our role is. Like the Memorandum of Understanding that was signed in September last year, the wheres and wherefores, because what we're doing, it all began in 2014 when we started with Positive Planet. We came together with them and we staged the 3 editions of the Positive Economy Forum, 2014, 15 and 16. In order to examine new economic models, forward-looking models, for the benefit of coming generations. And that was the background that led us to eventually, in 2018, roll out the first edition of the Sustainable Economy Forum in partnership with Confindustria. And this is where we examine the issues of sustainability and responsibility. So our experience here at San Petrignano has been, I think, a source of inspiration in terms of putting together the content of the forum, the agenda, but also for taking care of the tangible side of the work in Africa, because we're not actually going to Africa, we're not in Africa, we're here. We're here today, in fact, for the forum, but it's part of our history, it's part of what we've always done, that we gather together all the elements of sustainability, both economic and social. Right, yes, I just wanted to give us a few more details because I was quite impressed when I came here last year, and this time as well, was to see this huge number of thousands of people who over the years have gone through San Petrignano, and later on we'll be talking about inclusion in Italy and the inclusion of migrants in Italy. But at the end of the day, it all revolves around employment, about jobs, doesn't it? Well, not exactly. Let me say that this community started out in 1978. Since then, it's received 26,000 residents, and all of them have been offered the opportunity to become rehabilitated, to live drug-free, essentially, and also, I have to add that it's free of charge. So it's a process that includes healthcare, legal assistance, and it's a journey. And this is where we really get to the crux of the matter, because the aim is to rehabilitate the person as a whole and offering the opportunity to complete their studies if they wish, and also acquire some kind of qualification work-wise, because that's what they need to get back into the mainstream. So hence work is so important. So for obvious reasons, if we're seeking to achieve sustainability, we have to do it through our activities. This community can't live off public funding, because in the drug rehabilitation area, basically there is funding from the government, but it's very limited for the purely for the accommodation side that's covered. So we've had to seek support from private sources, private companies, but also from the proceeds of our activities. So, yes, and that's where the employment side is so important. Yes, unfortunately we're running about half an hour late, but that was only to be expected. We took a longer than scheduled coffee break. But let me go back to Frank Cinque for a minute, because he has an interesting story to tell about Africa. Tell me something that impressed you.
Well, and something that was certainly interesting in terms of the participation of Italian businesses is that we range from multinationals that are well consolidated on the market, for example, Mapei, CNH, Kamau. We have friends here from Magneto who are big supporters of Africa. And they really took they stepped up to the plate and they wanted to be part of this partnership, because we really work together and we work directly in Africa. Many of the answers came from small, medium-sized enterprises. But what was also interesting was that innovative Italian startups saw that with their applications they could actually work in Africa. Let me name a few. One in particular that builds building materials with recycled plastic, and we found a potential partner for them who does something very similar with a different technology in Kenya. They're starting to exchange ideas, and it may be a very promising collaboration. There's another startup that works with food security and microbiology, and they are working with a Kenyan business that has never exported to Europe, helping them to become qualified so that they can provide products required here in Europe, which until now has been very difficult. Arantxa Gonzalez, a partnership which you found very virtuous? Oh, thousands of partnerships. But very simply, I could summarize the three ideas of the partnership. First of all, this partnership is based on the market, on business. It is not a partnership based on charity. And who does business also does good doing his business. That is the idea. The idea is to get the markets operational. The second idea is that these markets are not there, these partnerships are not there for just one day. They're not producing results for tomorrow. They're producing results for the day after tomorrow, for 10 years from now. We need businesses that are forward-looking, that don't just look at a return on their investment today, because they won't get it. And thirdly, at the end of all of this, behind this concept of sustainability, be it environmental, social, based on solidarity, what lies behind all of this is competitiveness, because a competitive business is a business that exists today and will exist still in 20 years. Washing, social, environmental washing, or even solidarity-based washing does not last. It will not be competitive. It will not last. Marcella, what did you learn from all of this? What struck you? What struck you in your cooperation?
Well, what I've seen has actually reinforced what I already thought before, which is that, globalization has shifted manufacturing to low-cost countries, social, environmental, etc. So we've lost market share in terms of sustainable production in favor of non-sustainable production practices. What we want to happen in Africa is the following. We want sustainable manufacturing to be taken to Africa to protect their environments and societies. But there is another appeal that I would make in terms of globalization, etc. Europe is way ahead in best practices and regulating social, environmental practices, etc. I would like there to be reciprocity. I would like there to be a fingerprint from non-European countries in environmental and social terms in order to avoid losing sustainable production practices to non-sustainable production practices. So that's our goal when we work with Africa. We don't want to bring, to take to Africa things that you can no longer do in Europe, but European standards to Africa. Well, thanks to all of you. Thanks very much.